You think you can use those same tired bullying tactics to overpower me? Brad Cooper hissed through clenched teeth, his knuckles paling as he squeezed his fist. You really think that silence and avoidance will save you here at Lincoln? Samantha Carter slowly lifted her head, her calm gaze sweeping over the crowd, holding its breath. There was no hint of fear in her eyes, only an icy, unwavering resolve that seemed to freeze the air around her. I'm not hiding from anything, Brad, Samantha said, her voice clear and gentle, yet pulsing with quiet strength. I just hope you won't force me to show everyone who I really am. And just who are you? Brad sneered, a mocking curl of his lips, completely unaware that in just a few minutes, everything at Lincoln High would flip upside down, and he'd be the one begging forgiveness from the person he'd underestimated most. That morning's sky was a dull, slate gray, the clouds drizzling a light rain over the empty streets of Maplewood, Ohio. An old car rolled slowly into the small town, as if hesitating at the strange stillness that hung in the air. In the passenger seat, Samantha Carter rested her head against the window, her large, dark eyes reflecting both anxiety and the weariness of a long journey. At 16, Samantha was all too familiar with starting over. This was the 4th time in 3 years that she and her mother had packed up and moved. Their constant relocations weren't by choice, but by necessity. Her mother, Rebecca Carter, a devoted nurse chasing new job opportunities to build a better life for them both. Yet no matter how many towns they called home, Samantha understood one painful truth. However hard she tried, curious, and often judgmental stares followed her everywhere, like a shadow she couldn't escape. We're almost there, Sammy, her mother said softly, trying to break the tension that seemed to thicken the air in the car. Samantha offered a small, uncertain smile as she glanced out the window. The neat rows of small, weathered houses with their white picket fences passed by like scenes in a slow, somber film. This place felt worlds away from bustling Detroit, where she had been born and raised. Detroit had noise and chaos, but at least there she never felt quite so alone in her brown skin. The car finally came to a stop in front of a pale blue house at the end of a quiet street. Rebecca stepped out first, surveying the scene before turning to her daughter with an encouraging smile. Samantha, I really think this time will be different. Maplewood seems peaceful. Maybe this is our fresh start. Yeah, Mom, Samantha replied softly, her voice trailing off as doubt flickered across her features. After unloading a few essentials, Samantha stepped onto the front porch. A cold breeze swept past, making her shiver. From down the street, she noticed neighbors peeking over their fences, their eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Even such quick glances were enough to remind Samantha of the weight she always carried, that unspoken wall of prejudice separating her from the world around her. Suddenly, an older woman from next door emerged, her gaze scrutinizing Rebecca and Samantha without even hiding her discomfort. The woman's raised eyebrows spoke volumes, her distrust plain on her face the moment she saw the newcomer's dark skin. Samantha sighed quietly, bracing herself. No matter how peaceful this town looked, the same old racial biases formed an invisible barrier she would have to break through. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, her eyes squeezed shut as she tried to push away the exhaustion gripping her mind. Would this time truly be different? Or was she simply stepping into another cycle of old wounds and familiar pain? Once again, Samantha steeled herself for her first day at Lincoln High, knowing full well she would face wariness and rejection from new classmates and would have to fight for respect in a place unprepared for someone like her. Samantha never imagined that in front of her lay not just an adjustment period, but a fierce battle for her dignity, one that would shatter preconceptions, demand recognition of her worth, and proved to everyone willing to learn that her strength ran far deeper than her skin color. The first days in Maplewood passed in cautious silence. Samantha tried to slip quietly into the town's slow rhythm, repeating an old lesson to herself. Smile just enough. Speak in a whisper, and above all, never draw attention. Every step she took down Lincoln High's hallways was measured, as though a single off-note glance might set off a cascade of stares, or worse, vicious whispers. No one here would guess that, behind her slender frame, neat braids, and eyes that always looked down, Samantha had once been the name that sent opponents trembling at Detroit's junior mixed martial arts tournaments. For 4 years she'd trained through sweat and blood, conquering peak after peak, facing prejudice not only for her age and gender, but for her skin too. In the ring, taunts of "that colored girl" had knocked her to the mat, but they also forged an iron will and a resilient strength no peer could match. But in Maplewood, the ring, her trophies, her medals, all were locked away in memory's drawer, not out of shame, but because her mother, Rebecca, begged her to hide every trace. "Samantha, things are different here," her mother urged one evening, worry in her eyes as she peered past the curtains at curious neighbors. "They don't understand what they don't know. If people learn you were a MMA champion, they'll only judge you more harshly. I just want you to be safe, free from needless trouble." Samantha said nothing, but inside, a struggle burned. She knew her mother was right. Detroit had taught her never to count on strangers' kindness. There, Sam the champ was both a shield against teasing and a reason for reluctant respect. No one dared pick a fight. But here, a single rumor that a black girl had beaten dozens of male opponents would make Samantha rumor mill's favorite topic, or worse, a target for those eager to assert power. Lincoln High, so peaceful on the surface, hid its own underground currents. White student cliques clustered together, tossing off jokes about Detroit cops or those inner-city kids when Samantha walked by. On the sidelines, white parents waited for carpools, shooting condescending glances or whispering, "Isn't she the girl who transferred from one of those rough neighborhoods?" Amid it all, Brad Cooper embodied every Maplewood prejudice. Tall, blonde, usually wearing the football team's jacket with its bold logo, Brad was mayor of Lincoln High, in the eyes of teachers and town leaders alike. His father owned the region's largest auto chain, his mother headed the PTA, and Brad had never known a second of disapproval or had to fight for anything he wanted. Here, he needed only a look or a smirk to turn someone's ordinary day into a personal hell. From day one, Brad noticed Samantha, not because she stood out, but because her quiet difference in skin color irked him. In his mind, Lincoln High was his fiefdom, and anyone not like us, especially a new black student, was fair game to assert his dominance. At first, the jabs were subtle, but soon they grew bolder. Brad's friends exchanged sideways glances and half smiles whenever Samantha passed by. They spoke loudly of those newcomers, colored neighborhoods, and recycled city stereotypes. Though they never addressed her directly, every word and stare felt like a needle piercing her pride. Samantha grew used to the isolation. In class, turning in homework, even at lunch she sat alone in the canteen's farthest corner. A handful of other black students eyed her warily, as if befriending her could drag them into unnecessary drama. Yet what troubled Samantha most wasn't loneliness, but the growing fire of anger and the longing to reclaim herself. She missed the freedom of landing precise kicks, the roar of the crowd in the arena, the respect earned through skill rather than judged by skin. But with her mother's wishes and the town's prejudice pressing down, Samantha stayed silent, though inside embers glowed. She had no idea that this hidden strength, this bottled-up pride, would soon ignite a chain of events that would forever change her and all of Maplewood. The day Samantha feared most finally arrived, her first day at Lincoln High. A thin morning mist hovered over the campus, and inside Samantha's chest a storm of nerves raged. She told herself to walk quickly, stay humble, and draw no attention, hoping everyone would see her as just another new student. But in Maplewood, just another student was a luxury Samantha had never known. The moment she stepped through the front gate, she felt the scrutinizing stares. Whispers drifted from a cluster of students gathered on the steps, punctuated by giggles and pointed barbs. "Hey, another Detroit transplant. I wonder if they even know what manners are over there?" Samantha kept her head bowed and hurried down the main hallway, trying to blend in with the crowd. But her dark skin and quiet presence made her stand out against Maplewood's sea of confident, fair-skinned faces. She felt every cold glance tracking her every movement. At lunch, she chose a small table by the window, far from the noisy groups. She was unwrapping her lunchbox when 3 large shadows blocked her table. Brad Cooper stood in the middle, blonde hair cropped close, gray eyes ice cold, wearing the football team's jacket. To his left was Kyle Morris, short and sly with a mocking glint in his eye. To his right, Jake Sullivan loomed, tall with a taunting smirk. "Hey, Detroit," Brad said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Can't find a school in the city, so you had to come back to our hometown?" Kyle jumped in. "Or maybe Detroit's too dangerous now, right? It's peaceful here, but don't get too comfortable, newbie." Jake leaned in close to Samantha, grinning. "Looks like this kid's even more scared than the freshman." Samantha said nothing, knowing any reaction, even a glance, would only make things worse. But her silence seemed to irritate Brad most. To him, power wasn't just about threats. It was about controlling someone's emotions, especially a black student fresh from the city. Brad slowly sat down across from her, elbows on the table, eyes gleaming with malicious delight. "At this school, everyone follows the rules," he said, each word deliberate. "Newcomers like you, especially from a place as messy as Detroit, need to know your place. There's no room here for weird." Kyle and Jake sat on either side, boxing her in. Kyle pretended to grab Samantha's lunchbox and shook it. "Whoa, that homemade lunch looks interesting. Is that how they eat in Detroit?" Nearby, students watched, but no one stepped in. Their eyes flicked away, as if this had nothing to do with them, or worse, they didn't want to cross Brad Cooper, whose dad could make problems disappear with one call. Brad lowered his voice, leaning in. "You know who I am, right? Brad Cooper. Around here I call the shots, got it? You can do whatever you want in Detroit, but here, if you don't behave, you won't last the week." The tension was suffocating. Samantha clenched her fists under the table, her nails cutting into her palms. She remembered her mother's advice. Sometimes taking it is better than starting a fight. But the humiliation, the rage, and the helplessness of being targeted for her skin burned in her throat. Yet she remained silent, not out of weakness, but because she knew one wrong move could wreck her entire future here. After a few more minutes of cruel jabs about Detroit criminals and black girls who need to stay in their lane, Brad smacked the table so hard that Samantha's lunchbox tumbled to the floor, spilling its contents everywhere. "Clean this up, Detroit," he sneered, turning away as Kyle and Jake's laughter echoed behind him. As the cafeteria slowly returned to its usual din, Samantha knelt to pick up scattered rice, her hand shaking. Not from fear, but from the fierce hurt inside. From that moment, she knew. In Maplewood, her battle wouldn't just be loneliness. It would be standing up to polite faces hiding poisonous prejudice, with Brad Cooper at the very center of it all. The lunch period ended with Samantha's humiliation still clinging to every step she took as she quietly left the cafeteria, her empty lunchbox tossed deep into the trash. But that darkness was only just beginning to settle over her days at Lincoln High. For Brad Cooper, one public shaming was merely the opening act in the welcome ceremony he had devised for the black girl daring enough to set foot in his territory. The very next morning, as Samantha stepped through the school gates, Brad and his two loyal henchmen were already waiting by the stairwell, their eyes bright with anticipation of fresh entertainment. The moment they spotted her tentative approach, a cruel grin spread across Brad's face. "Hey, Carter," Brad called out, voice raised so everyone nearby would hear. "Over here, I've got something I need to tell you." Samantha hesitated for a moment, then tried to keep walking. But Jake blocked her path, shoulder to shoulder like an impenetrable wall. A circle of students began to gather, drawn by curiosity and eager to watch how the next victim would be handled. Brad stepped in close, eyes as cold as steel. "Back in Detroit, you probably got everything you wanted, huh? This isn't Detroit, understand?" His words were measured and cutting, each one designed to slice at Samantha's pride. Kyle jumped in with a low growl. "Around here, you want to stay safe, you follow the rules, especially black girls like you." Heat rose to Samantha's cheeks, her breath coming fast. Though insulted, she kept her composure, clutching her backpack straps, as if they were the last vestige of security. Brad wasted no time flaunting his power in front of the crowd. "Starting today, you'll give me $5 every single day. Consider it protection money. If you don't want your car keyed overnight, your desk slashed with ink, or your textbooks to disappear, you'll do exactly what I say." He offered her a mocking smile and tapped her shoulder as if he were granting a lifeline. Jake stood next to him, laughter bubbling up. "Back in Detroit, you're used to this, right? Don't even think about escaping Brad Cooper's rules here in Maplewood, kid." Brad didn't stop there. He turned up the humiliation for maximum effect. Speaking loud enough for all the nearby students to hear, he declared, "City folk always love to cause trouble, especially you black kids, but this is Maplewood, got it? Here, we decide who's safe and who's not." Scoffs and jeers rippled through the onlookers, mixed with impressed oohs and ahs, as though this spectacle were the afternoon's best show. A few students shook their heads and turned away, but no one dared intervene. In that moment, Samantha realized, in Maplewood, justice did not favor the powerless, especially not a lone black girl, new to town, without friends or allies. Though every instinct screamed at her to fight back, Samantha swallowed her anger. She saw her mother's worried expression flash across her mind and heard her gentle plea, "Don't give them any reason to hurt you." Drawing in a steadying breath, Samantha met Brad's gaze and responded with surprising calm. "I don't want any trouble. I just want to go to school in peace." Brad let out a mocking laugh, his eyes flicking over her face with cold satisfaction. "Then you'd better do what I say, Carter. People around here don't welcome strangers, especially ones who think they can get away with Detroit rules." Those last words cut her off from the rest of this small world as if with a blade. Samantha turned and walked away, her shoulders tight with tension, her shame weighing her down like a leaden burden. Yet, despite the hurt, she clung to her promise to her mother, to hide her true strength and endure, hoping only that time would pass quickly enough for the storm to die down. What no one could see was that behind her fragile appearance, Samantha was holding back an ocean of fury and wounded pride. But to Brad, this day was just the warm-up, a firm assertion of his power. And he was certain that Samantha Carter would never dare to defy the cruel rules he and his friends had laid down for anyone not from around here. The nightmare Samantha had long feared finally arrived, just days after Brad's warning. On Friday at lunch, the Lincoln High cafeteria buzzed with chatter and the clatter of trays, just another midday scene at a Midwestern school. As usual, Samantha slipped in and sat alone by the window, far from the trendy white cliques, hoping her lunch would pass unnoticed. But peace never lasted for someone who didn't belong here. Before she'd even opened the meal her mom packed, the thump-thump of sneakers echoed across the floor. The cafeteria seemed to freeze as all eyes turned to Brad Cooper's crew. Brad led the way, smug grin in place, with Kyle, Jake, and a few football players snickering behind him. "Hey, Detroit!" Brad called out loudly, making sure everyone heard. "I heard you still haven't paid up our protection fee?" Whispers rippled through the room, curiosity flaring in countless gazes. Samantha lifted her head, face composed though her lips pressed white. She forced calm into her voice. "I've already told you. I don't want any trouble." Brad smirked, glanced at Kyle, then stepped up and flipped his tray, sending hot soup, gravy, and steaming food cascading down Samantha's lap in front. "How's that for Detroit hospitality? Or is your skin so dark I couldn't see how filthy you were?" He laughed cruelly, each word dripping with cruelty. It happened so fast, many watched in stunned silence. A second later, the cafeteria burst into laughter. Some students even pulled out phones to record, thrilled by the spectacle. "Look, it's Detroit girl Stu," a girl jeered, pointing at Samantha's ruined clothes. Samantha froze, tears stinging her eyes, but she bit her lip to keep from crying out. Her skin burned, fabric soaked through, her body trembling with pain, shame, and anger all at once. The insults and mocking laughter stabbed at her like knives. Brad leaned in close and whispered just loud enough for her to hear, "Here, we don't let trash like you get above yourself. Remember my rules. If you don't, this is only the beginning." Jake cackled, while Kyle played innocent. "Oh, careful. Don't want the ghetto kids to sue you for racism, right?" A few black students present looked down, fear etched on their faces. Others turned away or joined the laughter. No one dared defend Samantha. In Maplewood, standing up to Brad Cooper meant social exile for you and your family. Hands shaking, Samantha gathered the remains of her lunch. The physical pain was nothing compared to the utter humiliation of being publicly shamed for her skin and background. She didn't look at anyone. She simply left, leaving wet footprints and mocking laughter behind her. She dashed to the girls' bathroom and tried to rinse the mess from her clothes, but the stain only sank deeper into fabric and skin. In the mirror, her braids plastered with soup, her eyes red and puffy, the fierce strength she'd worn as armor now cracked by shame. Rage roared inside her like an uncontrollable fire, but she held it back, hearing her mother's voice. "Stay patient. Stay silent. Wait until it's over." Yet today, Samantha knew her patience was at its limit. In the depths of her despair, she realized, if this happened one more time, she might not keep her promise to her mom, and she wouldn't hide who she really was in Maplewood any longer. The aftermath of that humiliating lunch haunted Samantha all day. Even though she'd scrubbed the soup stain from her shirt, dried her hair, and tried to freshen up before class, she couldn't erase the looks of disgust, the burst of laughter, or the racist taunts that had filled the cafeteria. Being stripped of her dignity in front of hundreds of strangers left her choking back tears, feeling utterly alone and furious. After school, she walked home in silence down Maplewood's empty streets, her mind a whirlwind of memories. Images of Detroit surfaced, where she'd once stood in the ring under bright lights, cheered as a true warrior, where those who had mocked her finally bowed in respect before her strength and pride. Here, though, she endured shame simply for the color of her skin and where she came from. That evening, as the kitchen lights flicked on, her mother bustled about preparing dinner, wearing a tired but reassuring smile whenever she caught Samantha's eye. Samantha helped wash vegetables in silence, her hands trembling with all the emotions she refused to show. Every caring question, "How was school today, honey?" only made her feel guiltier for hiding the pain of the day. Once dinner was done and her mother had gone upstairs, Samantha quietly pulled out her phone and dialed her old coach, Marcus Bennett. His warm yet firm voice came through the line, as familiar as the gym bells during their toughest training sessions. "Hey, Sammy. Long time no hear. How are you holding up?" That simple question broke her. Tears streamed down her face as she recounted everything. The insults, the blatant public humiliation, the crushing feeling of being trampled just for being different. Coach Marcus listened in silence, then spoke thoughtfully. "Samantha, I know you're strong, but Maplewood isn't Detroit. Here, one wrong move can get you and your mom in real trouble. Guys like Brad don't just have power at school, they have influence in town too. But you can't keep taking it forever. The more you tolerate, the weaker they'll see you. When you fight back, do it smartly. No witnesses who can twist your words, no serious injuries, and never give them an excuse to go after you or your mother." He paused, voice steely. "Remember, you have a right to defend yourself. But don't let anger cloud your judgment. Pick your moment and your method so they understand. You are not an easy target." His words cut through the fog of gloom in Samantha's heart. She thought of her mother, who'd sacrificed so much, and knew that if things escalated, it would hurt them both. Yet, by continuing to endure, she'd let all the other students of color live in fear, never free to be themselves. That night, Samantha lay awake by her window, watching the distant streetlights and hearing a patrol car's engine rumble somewhere nearby. For the first time in years, she didn't want to hide or bow her head any longer. She made a decision. It was time to stand up. Not for revenge, but to end the fear and show that she, and anyone like her, deserved respect. The next morning, Samantha walked into school with heavy steps but a steady gaze. From across the hall she saw Brad Cooper, tall, smug, eyes full of scorn. But she didn't flinch. She was ready for one last conversation. A battle not just between two people, but between her pride and a world of prejudice determined to drag her under. She didn't know if she would win or lose. But she was sure of one thing. This time, she would no longer be the silent victim. And deep inside, Brad Cooper remained oblivious that the day he'd spent proving his power over the school would soon become the day he paid the price for every cruel, arrogant act he'd inflicted on the weakest among them. That morning, Samantha walked into school just like any other day, quiet and low-key. But only she knew the resolve stirring inside her wasn't fear anymore. It was the calm before a fight she was destined to face. During PE, while the thud of football cleats echoed across the field, Samantha slipped away to the locker room corridor, exactly where Brad Cooper and his crew usually hung out after practice. As dusk fell and the last students poured out of the stadium, Brad strode ahead of his pack, his captain's jacket draped over one shoulder, eyes flicking arrogantly around. Kyle and Jake trailed him, throwing taunting glances Samantha's way, unaware that her restraint had reached its breaking point. Samantha stepped forward and blocked Brad's path. Her gaze was steady, no longer cast down, as calm as a still lake at night. She spoke in a low, clear voice that carried across the lot, making Brad's friends and a few passers-by stop in their tracks. "I need to talk to you, Brad." The entire lot fell silent. Brad arched an eyebrow in mock surprise, then laughed. Equal parts contempt and amusement at the new toy daring to challenge him. He couldn't believe a quiet, dark-skinned girl who'd always kept her head down would have the nerve to confront his power. "What do you want, Detroit?" he sneered. "Gonna cry for everyone again?" Samantha didn't flinch. "I challenge you, one-on-one, behind the stadium parking lot after practice. If you win, I'll pay your protection fee for a month. But if I win, you leave me alone and apologize to the whole school." Her words stunned the onlookers. Kyle laughed first and clapped Brad on the shoulder. "All right, buddy, let's see what Detroit can do." Brad glanced around at the watching eyes, especially the other black students who usually slipped by unnoticed. His ego wouldn't let him back down. "You got it," he said. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the crowd dispersed, news of the challenge spread like wildfire. The deserted lot behind the stadium held only a few parked teacher cars. Samantha stood ready, jaw set, fists clenched, breathing slow and controlled. She wasn't scared or hyped, she was focused, replaying Coach Marcus's drills in her mind. Each strike, each pivot, each disciplined hour in Detroit's gym. Martial arts weren't just revenge, they were her way to prove her worth. Brad appeared, swaggering in with his sleeves rolled up to show off his biceps, a smirk still in place. "This is my playground, Detroit. You ready?" he taunted. "Yeah, I'm ready," Samantha replied, her eyes ice cold. Without warning, Brad lunged first, swinging a heavy punch like an axe at Samantha. But she'd read his move a heartbeat earlier, a quick sidestep, and his fist sliced through empty air. In that same instant, Samantha fired back with a lightning-fast left hook to Brad's stomach. He doubled over, breath caught in his chest. Brad roared and tried to charge back in, but Samantha dropped back into range, every move smooth and precise like a dance. He threw a wild hook, and she simply slipped aside, then swept his knee with a low kick that sent him wobbling. The lot fell silent, except for Brad's ragged breaths and the stunned gasps of Kyle, Jake, and a few spectators hiding behind cars to watch the show. Samantha stepped forward without haste, her gaze sweeping over Brad's shocked face. The arrogance was gone, replaced by panic. He launched himself at her again, yelling, "You're just garbage from Detroit." In a flash, Samantha caught his wrist, jerked him off balance, and locked his arm so he hit the ground hard, enough to pin him without causing serious harm. It was the control her years of training demanded. Brad lay there, gasping, eyes wide with terror and disbelief. He had never been defeated, never made to kneel, especially not by a small black girl he'd mocked so viciously. Samantha released him and looked down with a steely calm. Her voice rang out across the empty lot. "This is the last time you touch me, Brad Cooper. I don't need your respect, but I demand you leave me alone. Otherwise, next time it'll be worse." In that moment, no one doubted Samantha Carter's power. No one again dared mock her for her skin, her background, or her silence. That fight, though it lasted less than a minute, shattered the power structure at Lincoln High, buried Brad Cooper's arrogance, and woke everyone up to the fact that injustice can indeed be overturned. The next morning, the halls of Lincoln High were electric. Word of the fight between Brad Cooper and Samantha Carter spread faster than any rumor. Small clusters of students whispered in disbelief, "Is it true?" Brad actually got taken down. by that new black girl? Curiosity quickly morphed into awe, and even a bit of respect. Even the teachers couldn't ignore the unusual buzz. Some watched Samantha with cautious eyes, others with a quiet pride, as the once timid girl strode into class with her back straight and her gaze forward. But all eyes really gravitated toward Brad Cooper. He showed up with a faint bruise on his cheek, his usual swagger gone, head down to avoid anyone's stare. Where he once ruled Lincoln High like royalty, he now looked like any ordinary kid, only much, much humbled. At lunch, the cafeteria was packed and tense. Samantha sat at her usual corner table, but this time she felt every pair of eyes on her, curious, doubtful, admiring, even resentful. A few white students murmured to one another, "Let's see how long she can keep that status." Some of the girls shook their heads, whispering, "It was just luck. Brad will get his honor back." Then, something unexpected happened. Brad Cooper marched over to Samantha's table, deliberately, determinedly. The room fell utterly silent. Phones clicked up, ready to record what might be the most extraordinary moment in school history. Brad stopped in front of her, pale-faced, lips pressed tight as if swallowing all that shame. For several seconds, no one dared breathe. Then, in a quiet but clear voice, he said, "Samantha, I'm sorry for everything I did. I was wrong." A ripple of stunned chatter swept the room. Brad's voice trembled as he continued, "I treated you horribly just because you're different, because of your skin and where you're from. That was wrong. I won't bother you anymore." Samantha met his apology with steady eyes, neither triumphant nor vindictive. She knew this was the moment countless victims of Brad had dreamed of, including herself. Yet she recognized that a public apology wasn't a humiliation for him. It was a release for both of them. "Thank you, Brad," she replied evenly. "I accept your apology." The air in the cafeteria shifted. A few students whispered to each other. Brad's former followers looked uncomfortable and shuffled away. But deep down, everyone sensed it. Today, the balance of power at Lincoln High truly changed. Change didn't happen overnight, though. Some white students still avoided Samantha, their discomfort evident whenever she passed. A few even muttered, "Let's see how long she lasts," under their breath. Some parents complained about the new girl disrupting the school and fretted about her bad influence. But to the students of color, and to anyone who had ever been bullied, that moment was like the first light at the end of a long tunnel. Jessica Evans, one of the few other black girls at the school, quietly approached Samantha afterward, eyes shining. "You did something no one else dared. Thank you, Samantha." From that day on, Samantha was no longer just the Detroit girl. She became a symbol of courage and the fight against injustice. Students who once cowered now stood taller, looking to her for inspiration. Some girls shyly asked to be friends. Others asked her to teach self-defense. Change at Lincoln High unfolded, slowly but surely. The resigned silence gave way to hushed conversations, then to action. Though prejudice and discrimination still lingered, the halls now rang with voices of freedom and respect, sparked by the unexpected strength of one small black girl who refused to bow to injustice. Since the day Brad Cooper was forced to apologize publicly, the atmosphere at Lincoln High has slowly begun to change. But that change still feels fragile, especially for students of color. Even though Brad's reign of power has crumbled, the echoes of prejudice and derision still creep through every classroom corner, every hallway, and, most dangerously, into the mouths of those just waiting for an opportunity to unleash their hatred on anyone who looks different. Samantha herself knows, even as she's become a symbol, the ghost of injustice is always waiting in the wings. just one misstep away from returning. One Monday afternoon, right after PE, Jessica Evans, the rare black girl at Lincoln High and the first to approach Samantha after her fight with Brad, quietly made her way over, flanked by 3 other girls, Angela Brooks, Tasha Lee, and Monique Carter. All 4 wore the same tense, anxious look, a familiar fear flickering behind their eyes. Before Samantha could ask what was wrong, Jessica's voice trembled as she struggled to stay calm. "Sam, can you talk to us for a minute? Not out here." They led Samantha to a secluded corner behind the school, where few students passed. There, Jessica let down her brave facade and whispered, "We're in big trouble. Have you heard about Travis Miller's crew at Westside High?" Angela bit her lip. "They've been waiting for us after school almost every day. At first it was just taunts, calling us immigrants as colored puppets. But it's gotten worse. Yesterday, Travis grabbed Tasha's hair on purpose and laughed about it in front of everyone." Monique's eyes welled up. "The teacher can't do anything because they're just joking, and it all happens off school grounds. If we tell our parents, they'll probably forbid us from the group or from going out after school. But if we stay silent, who knows what they'll do next?" Samantha clenched her fists. That same mix of anger, fear, and shame was all too familiar. She glanced around at the small yard, once a hangout spot for Brad and his followers, now a refuge for powerless victims fleeing violence. "How many of them?" Samantha asked, her voice unnervingly calm. "5, Jessica said. "Big guys, all athletes. Some of them have been warned for fighting but never faced serious consequences. Their parents are powerful in Westside," Angela added, lips pressed tight. "But it's not just size. They sling the worst racial slurs, trying to make us feel worthless, dirty. They act like we're nothing but alien colors in this town." Samantha looked at each of them and saw 2 things: deep-seated fear and a flicker of hope shining back at her. She knew that if she stayed silent or told them to wait it out, the bullying would only continue and likely escalate, hitting the most vulnerable hardest. Gently resting a hand on Jessica's shoulder, she nodded deliberately. "I'll help you. Tomorrow, go to the bus stop like normal after school. If anything happens, I'll be there, and I promise, no one will have to go through this again." The 4 girls exchanged surprised, teary glances. For them, that promise wasn't just protection. It was the first time in years they felt someone truly had their back. Yet that night, Samantha sat alone at her desk, quietly weighing the dangers ahead. She knew Travis Miller's crew weren't like Brad. They were reckless as well as cruel, willing to do anything to maintain their so-called white power in Maplewood. Samantha's resolve had been tested by fire before, but this time it wasn't just her own safety on the line. If she succeeded, she would light a spark of hope for every oppressed student of color in Maplewood, but one misstep could cost her the fragile security she and her mother had fought to build. Somewhere else in town, Travis Miller and his friends, still drunk on their usual arrogance and cruelty, were talking about those black girls at Lincoln as if they were new playthings, completely unaware that within 24 hours they would face a power and courage they had never imagined. That night, after promising Jessica and the others she'd help, Samantha lay awake, running through every possible scenario and risk. She'd faced bullies in Detroit, but Maplewood's prejudice was woven into the very fabric of the town. Not just its school hallways, but every corner of the community. She knew that any mistake or hint of rush could put her mother, and the girls depending on her, in serious danger. The next afternoon, the air was cold, and the weak sun cast long shadows along the road leading to Lincoln High's bus stop. It was the usual meeting place where student groups waited for buses back to distant neighborhoods. Jessica, Angela, Tasha, and Monique huddled together, glancing around nervously. Samantha sat beside them on the wooden bench, book in hand, but her eyes never left the approach. Her shoulders relaxed, but every sense was on high alert. Just as expected, Travis Miller's crew appeared. 5 tall white athletes in West Side High jerseys. Travis led the pack, his blonde hair cropped short and a small hate symbol tattoo peeking at his neck. He wore a half smirk of contempt and threat. The others loitered behind him, crude grins on their faces. Their arrival drew a chill through the bus stop area, as if all sound was drained by the violence they carried. Travis stopped in front of the girls and sneered, "Look who's here! Lincoln's little princesses. Been good today, or still playing dress-up in someone else's town?" Another boy glared at Samantha and spat out, "Check these losers out. You waiting for your daddies to pick you up?" Angela's hand shook. Monique pressed herself against the wall, and Tasha gripped her backpack straps as if bracing for the worst. Jessica searched for Samantha, only to find her calmly seated, eyes coldly assessing every move. Travis stepped forward, reaching to grab Jessica's hair as he barked, "Listen up. Maplewood isn't a joke. Mess with West Side kids and you won't make it home, got it? Or do you want to find out what—" Before he could finish, a blur of motion intervened. Samantha had risen from the bench in an instant and positioned herself between Travis and Jessica, a small but immovable barrier. Travis scowled. "And who are you, brat, to butt into adult business?" Samantha didn't answer. Her eyes stayed locked on his, icy and unyielding. Behind Travis, a bigger boy lunged to shove her, but Samantha used his momentum against him, sidestepping, dropping low, and driving an elbow precisely into his solar plexus. He doubled over, gasping in pain. The other boys froze, but Travis exploded in fury. "Get her! Teach this little witch a lesson!" One of them charged at Samantha with a wild punch. She leaned back effortlessly, then swept his arm aside and followed with a kick to his knee that sent him collapsing. Another thug went down in disbelief. Travis roared and slammed Samantha against the wall with all his strength. But brute force meant nothing against her trained precision and agility. She twisted free, locked his arm, and used his own force to throw him hard onto the pavement. His head cracked against the curb. Blood trickled from his lip as terror and pain filled his eyes. The remaining 2 boys gaped, their mockery evaporating into genuine fear. One trembled, then screamed for them to run, and they bolted, leaving Travis cowering in defeat. Jessica, Angela, Tasha, and Monique stood rooted, mouths agape, then burst into tears of shock and relief, for the first time in years truly feeling safe. Gently, Samantha laid a hand on each of their shoulders, her voice soft but firm. "You won't ever have to be afraid again. Here, no one has the right to degrade you for your skin or where you're from." That afternoon, at the little bus stop, Samantha Carter once more became a nightmare for bullies and a steadfast shield for every student of color who'd lived under the shadow of prejudice and violence. Yet she knew this showdown wouldn't be the end. It would ignite new storms. In Maplewood, change was never easy, especially for those who'd grown accustomed to ruling with fear and humiliation. News of the bus stop showdown spread through Maplewood faster than any hallway gossip. For many students of color, it was unprecedented. For the first time, West Side's most brutal bully fled, and those who once kept their heads down finally had reason to stand tall. But in other parts of town, not everyone celebrated this shift. To powerful families like the Millers, the collapse of white-skinned fear was unacceptable. Just weeks after the fight at the bus stop, real storms began. Travis Miller, who hadn't learned a truly hard lesson, seriously assaulted a white female student at Westside during a fit of rage. The local press broke the story, and the police could no longer look the other way. Travis was arrested and faced juvenile charges that could carry severe consequences. But the Millers refused to watch their son face legal ruin. Travis's father, Douglas Miller, one of Maplewood's richest and most influential businessmen, immediately hired a prestigious legal team. The courtroom battle shifted swiftly from defending Travis to smearing Samantha. They spun a narrative that Travis's violence stemmed from psychological distress caused by prior public humiliation and provocation at the hands of black student Samantha Carter. Accusations against Samantha spread like wildfire. Local papers ran pointed headlines: "Black student who beat Westside crew, heroic or inciter of violence." On social media, vicious racist comments flew. Those already hostile towards Samantha seized the chance to lash out, and some white students began to distance themselves from her, treating her as a troublemaker. Samantha wasn't the only target. Rebecca Carter, her mother, faced whispered rumors at the hospital, patients avoiding her, and even anonymous threats demanding that she and Samantha return to your city. Both mother and daughter lived in constant tension, knowing one wrong move could make everything collapse. Court date arrived sooner than Samantha expected. The Maplewood courthouse, normally cold and formal, was packed with reporters, students, parents, and sightseers. The Miller attorneys, impeccably dressed, deftly portrayed Travis as the victim of reverse violence and discrimination, and cast Samantha as the instigator who drove an innocent teenager to rage. At the witness stand, Samantha stood silently. She felt icy eyes and judging stares from teachers who once admired her, and from classmates who once trusted her. Every question from the Miller side was carefully crafted to paint her as an aggressive, hot-tempered black girl. "Is it true you attacked the West Side students first, even though they posed no immediate threat? Are you aware that defeating Travis publicly may have caused him serious psychological harm? What do you say about Travis losing control after being humiliated by you?" The courtroom fell silent after each question. Samantha's supporters, Jessica, Angela, Tasha, Monique, and a handful of other students of color, were present, but their small numbers were overwhelmed by a sea of skeptical white faces. Samantha's attorney, Mr. Foster, a seasoned black lawyer, rose to defend her fiercely. He emphasized that Samantha acted in self-defense, presented video evidence showing Travis's crew as the aggressors, and underscored the genuine fear Samantha and her friends faced. He reminded the court of Maplewood's undercurrent of racial bias, forcing the community to confront uncomfortable truths. Yet the backlash continued. Several self-styled neutral witnesses testified against Samantha, some deriding the violent nature of city kids, others claiming they'd seen Samantha get into fights before. Throughout the testimony, Samantha's eyes never left her mother. Rebecca, though in pain, kept her gaze steady, lending Samantha the calm and unwavering trust she needed. Rebecca knew that if Samantha faltered under this smear campaign, their community would lose one of its rare, courageous voices. Amid swirling public outrage and rampant misinformation online, Samantha learned to stand tall, facing every attack with resolve. As she stood before the judge and jury, surrounded by cold eyes and prejudice, Samantha understood that the biggest fight of her life was just beginning. But she was not alone. Beside her stood those she had protected, the voice of justice, and, above all, her unbreakable determination never to bow to injustice in a storm. Tossed Maplewood. In the stifling courtroom of Maplewood, every eye turned toward Samantha as she rose to take the stand. Fatigue showed on her face, but in the gaze of that small black girl burned unshakable resolve. She would not bow to injustice. All of the Miller camp's accusations and attempts to smear her seemed meaningless in the face of Samantha's calm courage. When asked to speak, Samantha's voice was steady and resonant as it filled the hushed room. "I did not choose violence, nor did I ever want to cause trouble. I only did what I had to do when I saw my friends being insulted, humiliated, and threatened by racism and aggression. I stood up not to show off my strength, but because if I didn't protect them, who would?" Below her, her mother Rebecca fought back tears, and Jessica, Angela, Tasha, Monique, and many other students of color wiped away theirs, moved by Samantha's honesty. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath at her words. The tension ratcheted up when the Millers' attorneys dredged up Samantha's martial arts background, branding her as belligerent and dangerous because she'd once been Detroit's teenage MMA champion. They painted a fear-mongering picture. A girl who has trained for thousands of hours could snap in a moment and cause catastrophe. But when Jessica took the stand, everything shifted. She recounted in vivid detail how Travis Miller's crew had launched the first attacks, hurling racial slurs, groping the black girls and showing no restraint, throughout which Samantha had intervened, deploying only enough force to stop them without inflicting serious harm. "If Samantha hadn't been there that day, we would have become victims of violence and abuse," Jessica testified. "She didn't just save us. She gave the whole school the confidence and courage to stand up against injustice." Next, Monique and Tasha bravely spoke of months of harassment, of feeling a knot in their stomachs every afternoon crossing the bus stop, of living in terror until Samantha intervened. "No one dared speak up or protect us before her," they said. Even several teachers, initially hesitant, stepped forward to confirm that bullying of students of color was a real problem at Lincoln High, and that Samantha's defense of her friends was an act of bravery that deserved praise, not condemnation. Samantha's lawyer, Mr. Foster, closed with a piercing argument that struck at the conscience of both jury and onlookers. Whom are we judging here? A small girl who dared to protect her friends, or a system that has for years nurtured violence and racism so deeply that people now see it as normal? If we convict Samantha today, we punish the last good thing left in our community. In that moment, even those who'd stayed silent felt their consciences stir. The Millers sat in stunned silence. Douglas Miller's face cold with impotence. Travis cowering, sweat and shame on his brow. After nearly 2 hours of deliberation, the verdict was announced. The courtroom fell silent as the judge's firm voice rang out. The jury finds that Samantha Carter acted in lawful self-defense. She is not guilty of violence, nor was there any intent to inflict injury. On the contrary, we recommend that the school and community take seriously the issues of racial discrimination and bullying to protect vulnerable students. Pandemonium erupted. Jessica, Angela, Tasha, and Monique wept and embraced, and students of color clasped hands in joyous relief. Samantha stood stunned, tears of pride, joy, and release in her eyes. Rebecca held her daughter tight and whispered, "You did it, Samantha." Outside, reporters jostled to capture every historic moment, while Lincoln High students cheered and hugged one another on the school lawn. Those who'd once cowered now stood tall. Those who'd feared bullying now had a hero to follow. As for the bigots and bullies, they could no longer justify their actions. Their faces betrayed shame, embarrassment, and bitter recognition of Samantha's resounding victory. A triumph not only for her, but for an entire generation daring to stand up to injustice and finally believe that genuine justice can prevail in Maplewood. News of the bus. Stop, showdown rippled through Maplewood, but nowhere did it hit harder than in the corridors of power. For students of color, immigrant families, and anyone who'd quietly endured injustice, the court's verdict was a fresh gust of hope, proof that a new generation could finally speak up. But for those used to wielding influence to bend the rules, Samantha's victory was an unforgivable insult, a slap at their ingrained pride. At the center of that fury was Thomas Miller, Travis's father, Maplewood Rio, a state mogul, a fixture at every community meeting, his word carrying weight on the school board. He'd never bowed to anyone, least of all some black girl daring to upend the order he'd always held sacrosanct. On the day of the verdict, he left the courtroom in silence, his face flushed with rage, his eyes blazing with humiliation and hate. In the days that followed, Mr. Miller's behavior grew erratic. He drank heavily in his office, snapped at employees, and even growled at his own family. On social media, anonymous accounts spewed vile rumors, denigrating Samantha with the crudest slurs, dredging up tired stereotypes about aggressive Black City folk. At home, Rebecca Carter warned her daughter to watch her back, avoid lonely streets, but Samantha knew that Mr. Miller's wounded pride would not rest at words alone. Sure enough, late one evening, after teaching a self-defense class for new students at the community center, Samantha headed home on Maple Street, the night lamps already glowing. The peaceful hush of the neighborhood shattered when a luxury car roared up behind her. She turned to see Thomas Miller stumble out, reeking of alcohol, his breath thick with boozy malice. "Stop right there," he snarled, his voice hoarse and furious, lunging at her like a wounded animal. You ruined my son's life. You think you can do whatever you want in this town, you insolent black brat?" Samantha froze for a heartbeat, her heart pounding, but her mind remained clear. She backed up, keeping her distance. "Mr. Miller, I don't want trouble. Please go home. If you don't, I'll call the police." But intoxication drowned his reason. He roared and swung a furious punch at her in the deserted street. Drawing on her MMA training, Samantha slipped aside, her movement fluid and precise. Miller overbalanced, nearly crashing onto the curb. Seizing her opportunity, Samantha executed a textbook wrist lock, guiding his momentum until he collapsed to the pavement, gasping and unable to rise. She held her ground, calm and controlled, refusing to strike him further, even though she easily could. Before Mr. Miller could regain his senses, flashing blue and red lights appeared at the street's end. A patrol car rolled up, apparently alerted by security cameras at a nearby convenience store and the city's surveillance network. A uniformed officer jumped out, radioed for medical support, and approached Samantha. She spoke up immediately. "He attacked me while I was walking home. I only defended myself. I did not use excessive force." Officers reviewed the security dash camera footage and took witness statements from bystanders. The video clearly showed Mr. Miller cutting her off with his car, lunging at her, and then Samantha's measured self-defense. The exact legal right to protect herself and no more. Within hours, Maplewood was in an uproar again. This time, the town's support for Samantha was even stronger. She'd shown not only courage, but also restraint and maturity, refusing to become the villain bigots had painted her as. Mr. Miller was arrested for assault and disturbing the peace. The community's outrage was palpable. Even those who'd once sneered at Samantha now recognized her as a symbol of justice, compassion, and the dignity of a black woman who would not bow to power or prejudice. In the aftermath, Maplewood's old barriers crumbled. No one dared hurl slurs at Samantha. Cliques that once whispered behind her back now greeted her with respect. From the school to the community center and every corner of town, tense silence gave way to admiration, gratitude, and the quiet confidence of a small town learning to embrace true equality. Since the incident with Mr. Miller, Maplewood's atmosphere has transformed in ways no one could have predicted. Samantha's self-defense classes at the community center are now packed with students of every background, girls and boys alike quietly signing up, eager to learn from her. Even teachers who once stood back and parents who once criticized her now seek her out to offer thanks for breaking the cycle of fear and silence. It's a victory far beyond anything Samantha or anyone else ever imagined. A victory for the entire community, built on unity and resilience. On graduation day, a gentle spring breeze carried the scent of blossoms across Lincoln High's courtyard, symbolizing the rebirth of a generation. Inside the assembly hall, sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, lighting up caps and gowns of every hue. But all eyes were on Samantha Carter as she took the stage, diploma in hand, her confidence and composure shining brighter than ever. When the principal handed her the microphone, his introduction brief but beaming with pride, the hall fell into a reverent hush. Students, teachers, local reporters, community leaders, and even elders rose to their feet, eager to hear from the brave young black woman who had changed Maplewood's history. Samantha drew a deep breath, her gaze sweeping the audience, where her mother's eyes glistened with tears of pride, where Jessica and the other girls she'd protected smiled encouragingly, even where Brad Cooper sat, no longer bully but genuine friend. Then she began, her voice clear and unwavering. 4 years ago, I walked through these doors gripped by fear of prejudice, and the wounds only people of color truly understand. I believed if I stayed silent and patient, everything would eventually be okay. But Maplewood taught me a hard lesson. Injustice doesn't disappear when we stay silent. It only grows stronger alongside our cowardice and fear. A wave of applause rose, then fell to let her continue. I'm no stronger than anyone else here. I have trembled with fear, felt despair, even wished I could leave this place, but I realized if I didn't stand up, countless others would remain trapped in the shadows of bigotry and violence. I used martial arts not to seek revenge, but to protect. I used my voice not to humiliate my opponents, but to stir consciences. And I've learned that anywhere, so long as we have courage and unity, any injustice can be overcome. The hall erupted again, students of color hugging and crying, teachers dabbing at tears, former bullies hanging their heads in shame. But Samantha was not done. Our skin, our ethnicity, is not a choice, but feeling proud of it is. I'm proud to be black, proud of the legacy of those who came before us and forged a path for our voices to be heard. We must never forget our history, nor allow the past to drown out our future. Never be ashamed of your roots. Let confidence, resilience, and compassion light the way forward. She paused, locking eyes with her classmates, each word ringing out. After today, I hope none of us will ever bow our heads to prejudice again. Speak up for yourselves, for your friends, and for those who cannot speak for themselves. Though we each follow different paths, remember, courage knows no color, justice shows no favoritism, and the future belongs to those who stand against injustice. A standing ovation followed, hearty, unending. Samantha descended the stage into her mother's embrace, surrounded by friends and former bystanders now eager to congratulate her. Then the principal announced a special decision. Beginning next school year, Samantha's self-defense courses would become a required extracurricular activity, with her as the honorary instructor. After graduation, Samantha chose not to chase the most prestigious scholarships by name, but to study sports psychology at a renowned university in a neighboring state. She wanted to understand the minds of students, the mental strength of those who have been oppressed. Meanwhile, she continues to run free self-defense classes for youth, especially children of color, immigrants, and victims of school violence. Samantha's reputation quickly spread beyond Maplewood. Journalists invited her for interviews, nonprofits thanked her, and other schools asked her to share her experience. Yet nothing filled her with more pride than seeing faces once fearful now stand tall, ready to defend themselves and the vulnerable around them. Brad Cooper, former poster boy for bullying, publicly apologized and volunteered as Samantha's assistant in her self-defense classes, determined to atone for his past. Teachers, students, and the entire town remained grateful to Samantha for having the courage to step forward, inspire others, and awaken the best in every person she encountered. On the final night before leaving Maplewood for college, Samantha stood by her window, gazing up at the stars over her quiet hometown. She knew a new chapter was just beginning, one filled with countless challenges, but more than ever she trusted in her chosen path. A journey defined by courage, perseverance, and above all, love for her community and the young voices still fighting for a fairer, kinder world. Years after that historic graduation day, Samantha Carter's name became inseparable from Maplewood's story, and it reached far beyond this small town's borders. Now in her 20s, Samantha was not only a top student in sports psychology, but also the founder of the region's largest leadership and martial arts center, Brave Roots Leadership Center. Brave Roots was unlike any gym or youth club before it. From day one, Samantha built it as a fortress of resilience and inclusion. The walls were covered with photos and stories of students who had conquered their fears, and panels described workshops where teens, black, white, immigrant, and native, learned to protect themselves and one another. Here, it wasn't just about fighting skills, it was about listening, sharing, challenging injustice, spotting every form of bullying and discrimination, and learning to say no with dignity and strength. Each year, thousands of teens from across Ohio, and even from further afield, came to Brave Roots carrying emotional scars, shame, or dreams they'd never voiced. To them, Samantha was more than an instructor. She was a living role model, a woman once driven to the brink by loneliness and danger, who refused to break and turned adversity into fuel for change. Every day, Samantha led small group leadership sessions and diversity workshops, emphasizing, difference is not a burden, it's an asset. Only by embracing and honoring your identity can you stand firm to protect yourself and others from prejudice. Her self-defense classes were always full, but what made them special was the culture of solidarity. Every lesson stressed controlling one's power, using martial arts to defend, never to seek revenge. Former bullies even returned as students. Samantha welcomed them, guiding them to take responsibility, learn empathy, and rebuild their own value. Brave Roots soon earned acclaim from newspapers, TV, and human rights groups as a shining model for nurturing brave, fair, and compassionate young leaders. Samantha spoke at major conferences, advised statewide anti-bullying programs, and was a guest of honor at inspiring events. Yet, Samantha never forgot her roots. Each end of year she returned to Lincoln High, the school that had once been both battleground and home. The hallways now brimmed with confident faces, former wallflowers leading clubs, championing students' rights. In the main auditorium, above the stage, a giant photo of Samantha on graduation day, eyes bright, smile serene, was framed by the motto, "Dare to be real, dare to stand, dare to lead." Beside it hung the honorary medal the city council had awarded, now a tradition passed each year to the student who best protects their community. Whenever Samantha stood before that image, she was moved by memories of hardship, of moments when her only weapons were her hands and faith in justice. She could still hear the cheers and tears from her acquittal in court, the applause at graduation, the proud gazes of her mother, her black friends, and even her opponents. Under Samantha's guidance, Maplewood changed from a closed, chilly town into a beacon of positive transformation. Here, new generations no longer feared speaking the truth. Black and white students cooperated to defend the vulnerable, and self-defense and life skills programs spread to neighboring schools. Many young people drew inspiration from Samantha's journey as they faced their own challenges. Even former adversaries like Brad Cooper, after years of remorse, became community activists, standing alongside Samantha in youth aid projects. Brad once told hundreds of students, "If it weren't for Samantha, I might never have understood true courage, the courage to change yourself and ask for forgiveness." Samantha Carter's legacy isn't in medals or headlines, but in the thousands of awakened hearts and a community once fractured now bound by unity and care. It proves that true strength isn't muscle or status. It's the resolve to defend what's right, the bravery to face and correct wrongs, and the commitment never to leave anyone behind, whether victim or wayward soul. In Maplewood's memory, Samantha Carter, the small black girl who once stood alone against a town's prejudice, remains a living legend, inspiring every generation. True strength always springs from courage, justice, and the will to protect the vulnerable. Her story is more than one girl's fight against racism and violence. It's a powerful testament to the might of bravery, solidarity, and faith in justice. From lone outsider to community icon, Samantha transformed an entire town and left behind a legacy of thousands who love fiercely and stand confidently for themselves and others. What do you think of Samantha Carter's journey? Have you ever witnessed or faced injustice, and what helped you overcome it? Share your thoughts, stories, or perspectives in the comments. Your experience might just inspire someone else. If you found this story meaningful, please like, share with friends, and subscribe so you never miss another inspiring video. Thank you for joining Samantha Carter's journey.